Jimmy Butler, he's a very interesting player to me.
Just goes to show the offense for the Dallas Stars could not keep up. And when the defense needed to step up, the Lightning's offense just overpowered them.
It makes it almost impossible for their bats to get going or have any confidence in the locker room when you're getting absolutely hosed on the defensive end.
He's like, oh shoot, I don't know where to go with the ball because I haven't been able to think.
It's their defense, man. Minka Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt.
You saw Luka. I'm very intrigued to see how Luka bounces back after his first playoff series.
For next season, there are massive free agents like Giannis. And if Giannis goes to a team like the Heat, like I said before, I expect them to win the championship. 4 teams who could win the AFC in my mind, legitimately. Steelers, Chiefs, Titans, Ravens.
Stay undefeated when they face the mighty Cowboys with Garrett Gilbert and Tony Pollard.
It was a great series. Game 4 was one of the best games I've ever watched in my entire life.
So happy when the Astros lost because it would definitely be a 2020 thing to have the Astros win a World Series, and then you have to hear them.
Now LeBron's a 4-time champion, and Anthony Davis gets his first.
It's unacceptable.
Yeah, I was impressed by their game. Braden Point, Andre Palat, Nikita Kucherov, that was the best line in the playoffs, no doubt.
I think you have 2 established number 1 wide receivers in Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, and I think you have an emerging star in CeeDee Lamb.
Hey everyone, I'm Jared Sandler, and you're listening to Outsiders Opinions with Kevin and Austin.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to our second part of Fixing Baseball. The first part, we talked about what we saw as problems, and now our second part, we will be detailing proposed changes to the MLB. These are not our changes. We're going to discuss if we like them, but that will be in part 3, where we come up with a set of changes that we would like to make, because we've pointed out some problems, but now these are from various articles, legitimate articles, and then other discussions that we have noticed. So we will get started, Austin, with the first rule, which is make the 3-batter minimum permanent. I'm gonna push against this because I think the 3-batter minimum puts hitters at risk. If the player's arm is dwindling at a rapid rate and he just has no control, I think you should be able to pull that pitcher, even though it takes time. I think it's important because we saw how Bryce Harper got hit in the face with a baseball because the pitcher couldn't control it, but they couldn't pull him because of the 3-batter minimum. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree, but for a different reason. This takes away jobs. You have a lefty specialist in your bullpen to face one lefty in the lineup and then take him out. And I'm completely for playing the game that way. Baseball's a mental game. We all know this, and I believe that the limit should be 1 batter.
Okay, I agree with you on that. It can take away jobs. I think the argument for this has been time. Like, it takes too much time to get another hitter or get another pitcher, but I just don't see that much.
They're worrying way too much about time, in my opinion.
Yeah. And then the second rule is implement and enforce the pitch clock. To me, this is also worried about time. And I think if done correctly, the MLB could see where it takes more time in some cases, or it feels longer than a football game. But I think the MLB could do it to where people enjoy it and it's different from all the other games. So I would be against this because I don't want to rush the pitcher because his routine allows him to have control. And if you rush that routine, it may cause more damage to the hitter because a ball hits him and breaks a bone.
Yeah, the MLB's worried way too much about time, and I have a major issue with putting in clocks for a pitcher to pitch. The pitcher's not going to just stand there and not pitch. They're getting ready and going over signs, and that means that those long signs where you're trying to not let another team cheat may have to be lessened so that the pitcher has time to go through his entire routine. So, yeah, I'm totally against this as well.
Now, this one I might be in favor of, lowering the mound. Um, I could be in favor of that because I think it brings, it may allow the hitter to see the ball better, and then we get more hits, which I would be in favor of. So I'm not totally against this proposed rule change.
Uh, I'm on the fence, but I'm gonna go. I disagree with it, mainly because I don't believe that's the issue with hitters right now. I believe it's them going up and wanting to not hit the ball and play and more hit homers. I think that's the reason why we're not seeing hits, not the mound. So I would not lower it. I think the players need to realize how to play the game that is more in a more fun manner than making a rule change here to just make it easier to hit more homers, because in this case they would be able to see the ball better and just hit more homers. So I don't believe that this. I think this would change the game for the worse.
Okay. Now, the next one is moving the mound back. I wouldn't, the ball would slow down, and that gives the hitter more time. So, kind of a similar reason to lowering the mound. So, I'm curious what you think about this rule.
I'm against it as well because there are slow pitchers out there who use their movement as an advantage, and that means that the ball's going to move more, and it's going to be really hard. It's going to be much harder to control. Pitchers have never pitched at a back distance like this, and for a slider, I don't know how far it's going to move when I go further back. It may move the same amount. It may not. Depends on the how the pitcher's holding the baseball and everything, the grip. And like I said, for slow pitchers, I mean, eventually when you go too far back, it's going to be like throwing it at 60 miles an hour when it gets to the batter. So it just, I don't think these are changes. I don't think the pitchers are the reason why baseball is less interesting. I think it's because of like I said, the mentality when you go up to bat.
I agree with that. Now, the next one is adopt an automated strike zone. And I could, I'm not totally against this. I think an argument could be that there is sometimes just some really bad umps, and I know that can sometimes be part of the game, but it can be so egregious if you just had an automated strike zone that could solve some of the problems that we see with some egregious calls on the strike zone.
I'm totally for this. I think it should happen. I think that the automated strike zone is a positive thing for the game. We would still have umpires at first, third, uh, second, and down the so yeah, first, second, and third. Uh, so we would first and third would be baseline, and second would be looking at the outs in the middle of the field. But um, I think those are just enough. I would love to see uh an automated zone, because it would just make it easier for everyone to know what the strike zone is. You don't have to play to the umpire's tendencies. You don't have to play to their bias. This guy calls it high. He doesn't call it low. So even though it's a strike low, you got to throw it high because he's going to call strikes high, or vice versa, or inside or outside. And it makes the game more have more continuity in between games, where every pitcher is pitching to the same areas. And it may make it easier on hitters too, because they know, hey, the strike zone's not going to be different this game. I don't have to worry about the ball at my face getting called a strike.
Gotcha. Now, the next one is don't juice the balls. I'm totally for this because I maybe like pick one ball and stay with that. Don't try to change it throughout the season like the MLB has been rumored to do, especially this past year. So I don't have any problems with this rule.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Now, I don't think the balls should be dead, but I don't believe they should be juiced. They should be the average baseball that they were using uh, 5 years ago, before this whole scenario happened where they were getting accused of juicing the baseballs. And like you said, whatever balls they decide to use, don't go back on it, because then you just take a step back and a step back and a step back because you keep on, well, this didn't work for the first week of the season. Let's change the ball. No. Players get used to whatever equipment you give them, so give them time to adjust and make this permanent. Just stay with the same ball unless something egregious happens.
The next rule is raising the minimum for players' money and also allowing the player to hit arbitration earlier. I am definitely in for this, as I think this can decrease tanking, and teams will spend more money to be competitive now. So I think this is a good rule. And what are your thoughts on this rule, Austin?
This is a rule that I have a lot of trouble with because I want it to happen in some respects, but others not really. Because some teams just don't have the facilities to keep their players for a long time, and that's why the MLB has this long time to get to be a free agent. I'm totally for lessening the, for increasing the amount of money uh, minimums across the board, especially in minor leagues more so because they're not really given as much money, and so if those minimums were increased, I think everything else would work out for itself. But I'm back and forth on the arbitration lessening because, like I said, uh, it makes it harder for teams that are trying to win but just don't have the facilities for that to keep their players.
I see your point, and now the next one is change the service time, how it is calculated. I definitely agree with this because I think there have been times where teams have abused it, specifically in tanking, to where they don't call a certain player up because of service time. And I think this is because they're trying to tank and make the most of their window. And I think if you lessen that, then you'll have arbitration earlier and then less arbitration. A lot more teams willing to spend and having a lot more competitive teams than just some competitive teams and then some teams that are just completely out of it. So both of the previous two rules have talked about have I'm definitely in for because I see them as eliminating one of my like major issues is teams tanking and how that hurts the game.
Yeah, I'm much more in favor of this one. Um, I'm totally fine with this because I believe that there are teams that are tanking, and this really does affect the tanking teams and not the teams that are like in my case where they can't pay for the arbitration. I don't think the arbitration should come earlier, but I do totally agree with the service time should be calculated different, so that you can't just sit a player in the minors for his entire career until your team's actually good, because then you can have a player until he's 35 and he's just become a free agent. Now he's not going to get any money. So I'm not as in favor of the last one, but I'm definitely in favor of this one. It's the timer should start when you're drafted.
Okay, that's an interesting way to calculate it, but it does give a certain event and then they can't manipulate it as they have done in the past. The next one is speaking of the draft is adjusting the draft order. I would definitely be in favor of this while I think it can make it competitive and it also leads you to have the right draft pick or have the right pick because you may not get a better pick or worse, you may not get the best pick next year. So you really need to play in it. There's no reason to lose games because you won't get a better draft pick.
I'm not. I'm in favor of keeping it how it is for the reason that there are teams out there that need a number one pick, that need that next guy in line, and that tanking or not tanking their team is terrible, and they need a guy to get them out of the gutter. I totally understand your point, uh, but I don't know how you could implement it where teams don't get, because again, without trading, which I don't think should happen. I don't think there should be draft day trading. I like the MLB is different there, and you keep your draft pick, and that's another thing why tanking I think is less than in like football. Because in football, you can trade that first pick and then continue to tank for a couple more years. It depending on the draft class. If the draft class is worse, you'll trade your first round pick, your first pick overall, to another team that is really seeking this one guy and feel like they're one piece away. But I don't know. This is another one I'm on the fence on, and I think the draft is fine the way it is. However, I do believe that the that teams that are perceived tanking, maybe you could find them or do something else like that to make sure that they are at least trying to put on a competitive team.
Maybe I was thinking draft lottery, but maybe you instead um, because I think where you were talking about your scenario where the team just doesn't have good players, I would be fine trading good players to get better prospects. But so then you get better players. But I think having maybe like a completely random draft order, like a set of 15 teams, which is similar to a lottery, but maybe the teams that just miss the playoffs get a better chance at getting a higher pick. So then teams that are closer to the playoffs get a better chance at getting a better player. That would incentivize teams to actually try, and then through the draft you can build more. So that's just a thought. What are your thoughts on that idea?
I like that better than the other proposed.
Okay, gotcha. So the next one that we have is a universal DH. I'm totally cool with this. I think there are minor ideas that you can do so you still have some strategy in the game. Like one, I think they were trying this out in a minor league system, um, and it is where a DH is tied to a pitcher. So when you pull out that pitcher, you need a new DH, and I think that adds to, and then you can change the order, and that can keep the strategy, which is when you pull a pitcher, and you still have to do a new DH, or you have to fill in a hitter for them. But I'm just not a big idea of where you have, well, one league has a DH and the other does not. I think a DH adds to more excitement, and you can still have a Shohei Ohtani or DeGrom hit, but for some pitchers just don't want to hit. Like Max Scherzer does not want to be at the plate. So the universal DH eliminates that problem for most pitchers. While there are some exemptions, you can have them still hit instead of having a DH. What are your thoughts?
I'm really intrigued by that minor league system that you brought up. For the National League, if they were to implement that, still have a DH, but they're tied with the pitcher, so whenever you take out the pitcher, you have to move the DH. The only issue I would have with that is you'd have to increase the number of players on your roster because if you went through a lot of pitchers, well, I mean that's just like hitting with your pitcher, but no, I think I'm fine with that. If the National League were to do that, the American League were to keep it the same, you wouldn't have pitchers hitting all that much. Yeah, I think I'm fine with that. I think I'm fine with
Okay.
what you just said. I wouldn't want it to be the exactly with the American League because I feel like having a dichotomy between both leagues increases my enthusiasm about it because whenever the Yankees go play the Phillies, I get to watch Garrett Cole hit. It's just it's fun for me. I know they're probably not going to get a hit, but it's cool. Uh, but if that was the case and we'd have to completely plan differently, I do think in the World Series there should be an advantage for the home team, and this is a big reason why is because uh, at home in the AL normally they're going to have a uh, a DH, but like Max Fried, who's a good hitter for the Braves, even though he's a pitcher, he can hit well, so it kind of adds to the advantage for the Braves because they actually have pitchers who can hit because they've been hitting all season. But I would be very interested in what you just said if that was implemented to keep the dichotomy while still having a DH on both sides.
Interesting. I kind of want to be like a generic, like it for both leagues. And I'm pretty sure I heard that in a Jared Sandler video about a year ago, and they were trying this out in like some coastal league. So maybe I know they tried out in the minor leagues. To a lot of the other proposed rules, they are trying this out in the minor leagues. But to me, I just kind of would want it to be the same. I know you said you you like the dichotomy. I kind of just want it to be the same. I think it can be a little too confusing when you have the NL one way and the AL one way. So I kind of want it the similar or both ways. Or or you just do no DH or full DH. I hope they do full DH. But the next one, I never really thought of this, but I'm really in for this. Really for this. And it is larger bases. And I really like this because it's said to reduce injury, and but it also would help increase stolen bases and infield hits. And I really like that idea because I think stolen bases are a great thing, and we can see more of it. And we've kind of seen the degrading or the lack of base running prowess. Like some teams are just not good at base running, and I think this would incentivize more base running, and it'd add a lot more action into the strategy of, okay, so he has to speed up. The pitcher has to naturally speed up his motion because he has a runner on base on first. So I really like this idea, and I never really considered it before finding this before this episode.
I don't know how I would think about that. In what respect are they bigger? How much bigger? I would need a lot of. There'd be a lot of conversation about that for me to decide whether I'm for this or against it. But right now, I'm just gonna stay on the fence. I don't want to make a decision now because I don't know how that would be implemented, and like I said, how big, how small is the difference. So
So I think it's about 3 inches. It was
every
15.
side,
Yes, it'd be 15 to 18 is what I read.
that's
I can
pretty big.
let
I
me pull it up.
I wouldn't make drastic changes. If I was gonna do it, I'm fine with making it bigger, but I'd make it bigger by an inch or an inch and a half. I wouldn't want to go 3 inches because at that point, like I said, all sides of the base are now bigger. It's gonna be almost impossible to pick off batters, which I do think is a very interesting part of the game. Is when a batter gets picked off, it keeps everybody on their toes. But I don't know. It depends on the size. It depends on everything. I could be for this if the change is minimal.
So they
Uh,
experimented with this in AAA, and it was just says 90 feet from base to base is the big league standard. So is the size of the base itself. Each side is 15 inches long, but the AAA bases this year will be 18 inches square and will be composed of a material that is expected to perform better in wet conditions. Because they said sometimes there will be more injuries if the bases are wet. So
I have personal
that's
experience with
the
that.
finger.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
slipped on my fair share of bases when the bases are wet. That can hurt.
And we've seen the
I'm
glove that some runners wear because they don't want to like jam their thumb.
the oven glove.
Yeah. Or and then sometimes they have it with fingers, but just on the hand. Like it's a fingerless glove, which is
Yeah, it's
interesting.
weird.
But the next one, and since you mentioned pickoffs, I'm not sure you're gonna like this one. It's limiting the number of step offs and pickoffs. I'm not totally against this, but I'm more interested in what you think about this.
I would disagree with this wholeheartedly because I believe that the why wouldn't the batter? There's no reason not to steal. If you're a great base runner, the whole reason of pickoffs, the whole thing about pickoffs, is to keep the base runner from stealing. You're not necessarily always trying to get him out. You're trying to keep him from stealing because if the guy's like, is he gonna step off or is he not gonna step off? Because if he doesn't step off, I can go. I can go. But if he does step off, I can't go because he'll pick me off. But if the pitcher if runs out of pickoffs, I would still first base if I'm David Ortiz because I would just time the guy and I would get there and I would steal every base and that would make it to where everybody steals every base ever. So
Well, it's
yeah,
not
no.
totally eliminating pickoffs, but I just sometimes it can be
You said there would
repetitive.
be a pickoff number, so I'm saying in the ninth
Yeah.
inning when the guy's a lot of pickoffs, they're gonna steal
No, I think
second
it's
and then third.
per pitch or per at bat. There's a limited number of pickoffs.
Again, if you sometimes when Trey Turner's on base, you have to pick off a little bit more, and you probably go over that. And when Trey Turner will probably just get off on a relatively large lead for him, get picked off, not get out, and get picked off, and then steal second eventually because he would just be like, well, I'm just gonna get all rid of all of his pickoffs, and then I know he can't pick off, and then I'm just gonna steal second base.
To me it can be like very repetitive. Like, okay, stop just trying to
I'm not.
throw
I'm. It's again. It's the small things in the game. I love pickoffs. I understand their use, and they're very useful when Billy Hamilton's on base, when a fast guy's on base, anybody, Whit Merrifield's on base, when Trey Turner's on base, when a good base runner's on base, you need pickoffs. You just have to have them.
Yeah, with me it's okay
I
when
know.
it's
I
like
know the people
three
who
straight
aren't.
pickoffs in a row. I'm like, okay, let's not have that.
Yeah. That's just. You and I knew this before this episode. We look at baseball differently,
Yes.
and I'm totally for that.
Okay.
I I, I thoroughly enjoy when somebody gets picked off because again, it adds intensity to the game. They could be out on that third one, the fourth one, the fifth one. But
Gotcha.
I understand why for viewers who haven't been in baseball that long find issue with it because some people could see it as like, a waste of time. While I don't, I think it's a very important part of the game to allow for your team to stop base running, not allow them to get in scoring position by getting to second base. I understand why others view it differently. I would
Yeah,
not be for it though.
okay, I see your point. I was curious once you said pickoffs. I was like, okay, wonder how you think about this rule. Now, this rule I'm totally against. It's restricting the shift. I like the shift is one way how teams have found them. Like it was started by the Pirates, and that helped them go make it to the playoffs for the first time in a very long time. And I think there is a way to beat the shift. I think there's a way to find a way to get into that hole and that just large hole when it's like Joey Gallo, you can bunt.
He bonded that
Um,
one time. He did. I
he
watched the
did.
game.
So I would totally be against restricting the shift because I think there are ways that you can beat the shift, and we just haven't reached all those ways. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
if you restrict the shift, you are saying the players in the MLB aren't good enough to beat it. And I am wholeheartedly against that. You're basically saying, oh, well, the players in the MLB aren't good enough to beat the shift, so we have to restrict the shift. No, that's not the case. If you want to beat the shift, you can. Just learn
I
how to beat it.
Yeah.
And so I'm totally against that rule change.
Now the next one, I'm pretty sure I know your answer is expanded playoffs.
Oh, yeah, I'll go first here. I'm totally against expanded playoffs. I like when teams deserve to be in, and not every team in the league, more than half the league in the case of the MLB, not MLB, NBA makes it to the playoffs. Those teams just don't deserve it. And now that 20 teams make the playoffs basically in the NBA, because I basically consider the play-in as the playoffs. It is the playoffs. Uh, it makes it to where terrible basketball can be played in the playoffs, and I don't want to watch terrible baseball in the playoffs. I just don't. I don't want to watch a team that doesn't deserve it. Every season, if you made the playoffs, you deserve it in the MLB. It doesn't matter if you're the 5 seed. We've seen the Nationals and other teams as the 5 seed win the World Series. If you make the playoffs, you deserved it. You are a quality team. You are a top 10 team in the MLB. Now, I would change. I told you this. I would reseed it. Top three division people in the division, I'm fine with that. And then the two others, I'm totally fine with that. Reseed it once you get in by record, so that the Giants and Dodgers play in the NLCS, not in the NLDS. There's no guarantee that would have happened. Obviously, I'm just saying in general. I would reseed it. I'm fine with the way it's set up. Reseed it once it gets into the playoffs. Do not increase it. I know you're just trying to get money. Stop for once trying to get money.
That might be tough, especially for MLB owners. But I do agree. I see it as money, and I don't. They tried this, and there was.
It was terrible.
Yeah, it was terrible. So don't do this. This next one, the final one, is a cap floor. I think I would be for this because it's going to get rid of tanking. Like you have to go pay players, so try to go be smart with your money and build a good roster. And we've seen just like how Scherzer is making more money than the Pirates um, annually than the Pirates like whole roster. We talked about this in part one, so I would totally be for the cap floor.
I'm totally for it as well. I wouldn't be necessarily for every number they brought, but again, I said 50. I think 50 is my cap floor. Uh, if it was 50, I could go up to I think 60. I'd be fine with 60. Uh, I wouldn't want to go much more over that. Because in some cases you're just playing a lot of rookies. You're not even trying to tank. You're just like, well, we all of our good players are rookies, so we like the Rays sometimes. Even though the Rays historically do not pay their players, there's sometimes, well, Randy Rosarena, Wander Franco before they were paid. Well, they're just good and not getting paid a lot, so let's not have a cap floor in that situation. But 50 to 60, I'd be fine with a cap floor anywhere between there.
Yeah, I'm good with that too. Just to where you like are not paying like just pay someone and maybe something works out. So that concludes all the proposed rule changes. That was part two. Part three will be us deciding what rules we want to add. So be on the lookout for that. And there's a little playlist on YouTube that's called Fixing Baseball where you can find all these parts. If you're just joining us for part two and you didn't hear part one, go look in that playlist and go find part one. Thank you for listening to Outsiders Opinions.